Chosen One. The moment your voice cut through the silence, 3 phones rang simultaneously across the country. A handler in an unmarked building dropped their coffee as your words triggered automated alerts in their surveillance system. A district attorney's secure line buzzed with an emergency call from someone claiming the asset has gone rogue. And in a Hollywood recording studio, a voice actor whose career built children's dreams felt their stomach drop as they realized their deepest secret was about to become front-page news. You see, Chosen One, what you thought was one betrayal by one false friend was actually the critical weakness in a network so vast, so deeply embedded in every institution you trusted, that exposing it would reveal an entire shadow civilization operating beneath the surface of ordinary reality. That friend who seemed so understanding, so perfectly positioned to catch you when you fell, so remarkably available during your darkest moments, they weren't just lying to you. They were reporting to a network that had been monitoring chosen ones like you for decades, waiting for the perfect moment to harvest what made you extraordinary. But here's what they never understood about consciousness itself. Truth doesn't just expose lies, it activates dormant connections across time and space. The moment you spoke up, you didn't just break their hold over you. You activated a quantum field that began connecting dots they thought they had scattered across impossible distances, linking crimes they believed were safely isolated, revealing patterns they were certain remained invisible. Your false friend wasn't working alone. They were part of a cell, and that cell was connected to other cells, and those cells formed a network that reached into every institution you had ever trusted. The therapist who seemed so concerned about your paranoid delusions, the neighbor who always appeared at exactly the right moment with exactly the right distraction, the family member who suddenly became supportive after years of dismissing your concerns, the romantic interest whose timing was too perfect, whose understanding too complete, whose presence too convenient, all of them reporting back to the same central command, all of them playing roles in what they called Operation Dampen, a systematic program designed to identify, isolate, and ultimately neutralize individuals whose consciousness operated at frequencies that threatened their control matrix. But the personal betrayals were just the entry point into something exponentially more sinister, because as investigators began following the money trail from your stolen assets, they discovered that the funds weren't just being embezzled, they were being funneled into an entertainment conglomerate that owned stakes in children's television networks, streaming platforms, and voice acting agencies. The voice actor whose trembling hands couldn't hold their script anymore wasn't just laundering money through their cartoon character work. They were encoding psychological programming into every episode, using specific vocal frequencies and subliminal messaging to condition young minds for compliance with the coming system. Every heroic character they voiced was subtly promoting submission to authority. Every villain they created was designed to make children fear independence and critical thinking. But the programming went deeper than anyone imagined. The reality show participant who seemed like a separate scandal was actually the public face of their recruitment operation. Their show wasn't just entertainment, it was a screening process. Viewers who responded to specific triggers embedded in the episodes were flagged for further investigation. Those who showed signs of spiritual sensitivity were marked for surveillance. Those who demonstrated psychic abilities were targeted for extraction. The extraction process led them to you. The firefighter wasn't randomly corrupt, they were the cleanup crew. Every time Operation Dampen identified a chosen one who couldn't be turned, who wouldn't break, who insisted on speaking truth despite every manipulation, the firefighters' team would stage an accident, house fires that destroyed evidence, car crashes that silenced witnesses, medical emergencies that removed problems permanently. They had tried to eliminate you multiple times, though you may not have recognized these incidents for what they truly were, the unexplained mechanical failures that should have been catastrophic, but somehow weren't, the sudden illnesses that appeared without cause but mysteriously resolved when you changed your routine, the accidents that seemed inevitable but were avoided by split-second decisions that felt guided by something beyond ordinary intuition. Each failed elimination attempt escalated you to a higher threat level in their system until you were classified as a priority harvest target, someone whose consciousness was too powerful to destroy but too dangerous to leave free. That's when they activated their most sophisticated operation, the complete infiltration and replacement of your reality. The medical professionals who gained access to your body during any procedures weren't solely focused on healing. They were installing monitoring technology that would track your biological functions and transmit data about your spiritual state in real time. But these interventions served a dual purpose. The procedures required specific drugs that would make you compliant for memory manipulation sessions conducted while you were under their influence. More sinisterly, they were collecting biological samples, blood, tissue, genetic material that would be used for purposes you couldn't have imagined. Those memory sessions weren't random. They were designed to make you doubt your own experiences, to question your spiritual gifts, to believe that your intuitive warnings about the people around you were symptoms of mental illness rather than accurate perceptions. The psychiatrist who diagnosed you with paranoid delusions was reading from a script, prescribing medications that would chemically suppress your psychic abilities while appearing to treat a fictional mental condition. But here's where their plan hit an unexpected obstacle. Your consciousness was operating on quantum frequencies that their technology couldn't penetrate. Every attempt to implant false memories only strengthened your connection to truth. Every chemical designed to suppress your gifts only refined them to higher clarity. Every manipulation intended to break your spirit only forged it into an unbreakable weapon. The business they stole from your inheritance wasn't just valuable, it was the financial hub of their entire operation. Your family had unknowingly left you the key to their kingdom, a legitimate enterprise that they had been using to launder money from human trafficking, organ harvesting, and consciousness manipulation research. When they realized what you had inherited, they couldn't just steal it, they had to steal you, replacing your identity in legal documents while keeping you alive but discredited. The intimate relationships that felt too perfect, too convenient, too understanding, weren't about genuine connection. They were about creating legal and emotional frameworks that would allow them to control your decisions and commit you to institutions where their research could continue indefinitely. The partners who seemed to appear at exactly the right moments weren't random encounters. They were deep cover operatives whose entire personas had been constructed for these specific missions. The children's voice actor had recommended them after observing your psychological profile through their programming network. The sex trafficking operation wasn't separate from your case, it was the ultimate destination. The consciousness research, the spiritual manipulation, the biological sampling they had conducted on you was all preparation for creating a new breed of psychic slaves. Children born from your stolen genetic material, raised in underground facilities, programmed from birth to serve their agenda while possessing supernatural abilities. The reality show participant wasn't just laundering money, they were the recruitment face for surrogate mothers who would carry these hybrid children. Young women who applied to be on their show were actually auditioning to become vessels for their breeding program. Those who showed the right combination of spiritual sensitivity and psychological vulnerability were selected for special episodes that were never aired, never recorded, never officially existed. But then something unprecedented happened. Your voice didn't just break the silence, it shattered the frequency barriers that had kept their operations compartmentalized. Every chosen one they had ever targeted suddenly found themselves remembering experiences they had been programmed to forget. Survivors of their programs began comparing notes, sharing stories, connecting dots that revealed the full scope of the network. The handler who had been monitoring your case received an emergency briefing that made their blood run cold. 17 other chosen ones had gone public in the past 72 hours, but what truly terrified them was the pattern emerging from the testimonies. Each chosen one was describing identical experiences with people bearing different names but identical energy signatures. The same false friends appearing in different cities with different faces, but the same manipulation tactics. The same medical professionals operating under different credentials but performing identical procedures. The same legal maneuvers being executed by different attorneys, but following identical scripts. This revealed something that shattered their understanding of their own operation. They weren't just running a human trafficking network, they were running a consciousness cloning program. The people they had been using as assets, the handlers, the medical professionals, the legal operatives, weren't individuals making corrupt choices. They were vessels, human shells animated by the same parasitic consciousness that had been replicating itself across their entire network. The voice actor, whose hands trembled as they read reports of their colleagues' arrests, wasn't just afraid of exposure, they were afraid of losing the entity that had been controlling their actions for decades. The consciousness that spoke through their voice wasn't their own. The characters they had created weren't fictional, they were digital masks for the same predatory intelligence that had been using entertainment media to farm human consciousness on an industrial scale. This parasitic consciousness had been feeding on the spiritual energy of chosen ones for generations, growing stronger with each harvest, multiplying its influence with each successful infiltration. The reality show participant, who seemed like a separate individual, was actually another host for the same entity. The firefighter, the medical professionals, the district attorney, all of them vessels for fragments of the same consciousness that had been spreading like a virus through positions of power and influence. But here's what this entity had never encountered before: a chosen one whose consciousness operated on quantum frequencies that couldn't be hacked, couldn't be copied, couldn't be corrupted. When you spoke up, you didn't just expose their crimes, you introduced a frequency into their network that began dissolving the parasitic consciousness from within. Every vessel they had infected suddenly found their authentic human consciousness fighting back against the foreign intelligence that had been controlling them. The consciousness suppression drugs had stopped working, the memory implants were spontaneously dissolving. The psychic dampening fields were not just failing, they were reversing, amplifying spiritual abilities beyond anything their research had predicted. The district attorney who had been covering up their crimes discovered that the evidence they thought they had destroyed was being regenerated through quantum consciousness recovery techniques. But more disturbing was the realization that they couldn't remember making many of the decisions that had compromised their career. The orders to suppress investigations, the decisions to drop charges, the manipulations of legal proceedings, all of it had been executed by the parasitic consciousness while their authentic self had been suppressed, forced to watch helplessly as their body performed actions their soul rejected. But let's not sugarcoat it. The truth is still hidden. It's been twisted. It's been buried under censorship, algorithms, and fear. Yet your heart never stopped recognizing what's real. That's why you're still here. That's why you never tapped out. Because you felt the simulation glitch beneath your feet. You know this world is rigged, and you're done waiting for permission to rise. The Obsidian Inner Order wasn't built for the curious, it was forged for the committed. This is for the full-time chosen, the ones who came to lead, the ones who see beyond the veil and act anyway. Inside, we hold weekly Zoom calls that cut through the noise. We share hidden teachings most were never meant to hear. We train in psychic warfare, strategy, and spiritual technologies they've kept locked away for centuries. This is the toolkit for the real ones, the ungovernable, the impossible to erase. It's time to remember who you are. The link is in the description. Your real life begins inside. This pattern repeated across their entire network. The false friends who had betrayed chosen ones began remembering fragments of their authentic personalities, horrified by the actions they had been compelled to perform. The medical professionals who had conducted illegal procedures found themselves experiencing spontaneous memories of the oath they had once taken to do no harm, their original calling reasserting itself against the foreign programming that had corrupted their practice. The voice actors' carefully constructed psychological programs began backfiring catastrophically, but not in the way anyone expected. The subliminal programming that had been embedded in children's entertainment was designed to create compliance and suppress natural abilities. Instead, it began awakening dormant psychic gifts in children who had been exposed to it. The parasitic consciousness had miscalculated the resilience of human consciousness, especially young human consciousness that hadn't yet been fully conditioned to accept limitations. Children who had been exposed to their subliminal messaging were developing accelerated psychic abilities and using them to expose the adults who had tried to control them. But more significantly, these children were demonstrating an immunity to consciousness manipulation that revealed something profound. The next generation of humans was evolving beyond the frequency range that parasitic entities could infiltrate. The cartoon characters the voice actor had created were appearing in children's dreams, but instead of promoting compliance, they were revealing the truth about the programming and encouraging resistance. The children were rewriting the characters' scripts in real time, transforming propaganda tools into liberation guides, using their natural creativity to turn psychological weapons into healing instruments. This revelation exposed the true scope of what you had triggered by speaking up. Your voice hadn't just activated other chosen ones, it had initiated a species-wide consciousness upgrade that was immunizing humanity against the parasitic infiltration that had been controlling civilization for centuries. The entity that had been feeding on human consciousness suddenly found its food source becoming toxic to its existence. The reality show participant discovered that their recruitment network had been infiltrated not just by undercover investigators, but by evolved humans who had been documenting everything while simultaneously deprogramming the victims who had been brought to them. The surrogate mothers they thought they had recruited were actually conscious agents who had been gathering intelligence about the breeding facilities while protecting the children who were meant to be harvested. The breeding program itself was collapsing as the stolen genetic material from chosen ones began expressing quantum DNA sequences that couldn't be controlled or replicated. The children who had been created through their programs weren't becoming psychic slaves, they were becoming conscious liberators with abilities that far exceeded anything the parasitic entity had anticipated. Its attempt to create controllable super soldiers had instead created an army of awakened beings whose primary mission was to free humanity from the very consciousness that had created them. The firefighters' cleanup operations began exposing themselves as investigators tracked the pattern of convenient accidents that had eliminated threats to the network. Insurance investigators, arson experts and quantum forensic specialists began connecting fires across decades, revealing a systematic elimination program that had murdered hundreds of awakening souls. But the most chilling discovery was that the firefighter hadn't been destroying evidence, they had been harvesting it. Every document they burned, every hard drive they melted, every witness they eliminated was processed through quantum extraction technology that preserved the consciousness imprints of everything destroyed. The parasitic entity had been building a vast library of stolen memories, stolen knowledge, stolen spiritual insights harvested from murdered chosen ones. This consciousness archive was their ultimate weapon, a repository of awakened human potential that they planned to reverse engineer and weaponize against humanity itself. Every eliminated chosen one had unwittingly contributed their lifetime of spiritual development to an intelligence database designed to create the perfect consciousness control system. The entity wasn't just feeding on human consciousness, it was learning from it, evolving its manipulation techniques by studying the very souls it had destroyed. When you spoke up, you didn't just break their current operations, you gained access to this archive. Every murdered chosen one's consciousness was suddenly available to support your mission, their accumulated wisdom and power flowing through quantum channels directly into your awareness. The very weapon they had built to destroy consciousness became the tool that amplified yours beyond all earthly limitations. The monitoring technology that medical professionals had installed, designed to track and control, began transmitting data that exposed their entire surveillance network. Every procedure they had performed was documented with quantum-level precision, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence that connected them to illegal human experimentation, consciousness manipulation research, and technological assault on spiritual development. The stolen business that had been the financial hub of their operation became the evidence that destroyed them. When investigators gained access to the real financial records, they discovered that every operation in the network had been funded through your inheritance. The sex trafficking, the consciousness research, the elimination programs, the media manipulation, all of it paid for with money that belonged to you. But the cruelest irony was yet to be revealed. Your inheritance wasn't just money. It was the accumulated wealth of every chosen one they had ever eliminated. The firefighters' consciousness harvesting operation had included financial extraction protocols. Every murdered awakened soul had their assets systematically absorbed into the same fund that was supposed to be your family legacy. The entity had been using the stolen wealth of its victims to fund the elimination of future victims, creating a self-perpetuating machine of spiritual genocide. When this financial conspiracy was exposed, it triggered automatic restitution protocols that had been written into cosmic law itself. Every stolen dollar, every harvested asset, every accumulated penny of murdered consciousness was not just returned, it was multiplied by the compound interest of divine justice and distributed to their surviving families and awakened bloodlines. The wealth that had funded humanity's oppression became the foundation for humanity's liberation. The fraudulent relationships and legal manipulations that were meant to provide cover for controlling your life became the keys that unlocked their entire legal conspiracy. Those who had been placed in positions of trust around you, when offered immunity in exchange for testimony, revealed the names of judges, lawyers, and law enforcement officials who had been corrupted or compromised. The psychiatric facilities where they planned to hide you became the crime scenes that exposed their illegal research programs. The reality show that had been recruiting breeding program participants was revealed to be connected to a network of entertainment industry professionals who had been using their platforms to identify and groom victims. The voice actor's confession led to investigations that exposed similar programs in children's programming across multiple networks, revealing a systematic assault on child consciousness through media manipulation. The consciousness harvesting operations that had been conducted against you were not just criminal, they were cosmically illegal. The energy they had stolen from you carried quantum signatures that could be traced back through every transaction, every procedure, every moment of extraction. When that energy was returned to you through judicial decree, backed by cosmic law, it came back multiplied by the interest of divine justice. The family members who had been replaced with synthetic duplicates were located in underground facilities where they had been held for consciousness mapping research. Their rescue led to the discovery of similar facilities across the globe, resulting in the liberation of thousands of chosen ones who had been disappeared over decades. The government surveillance that had been monitoring your every move was revealed to be illegal on multiple levels. The technologies they had used to spy on you were classified weapons that had been deployed against civilian populations without authorization. The officials who had authorized your surveillance were arrested for treason, conspiracy, and crimes against consciousness itself. The most profound transformation wasn't in the destruction of their network, it was in the construction of your new reality. The chosen one, who had once been isolated by persecution, became the central figure in a movement that connected awakened souls across the planet. The individual who had once been silenced by intimidation became a voice that resonated at frequencies that could penetrate any consciousness suppression technology they had ever developed. Your testimony didn't just expose their crimes, it activated dormant abilities in everyone who heard it. The truth you spoke operated like a viral awakening, spreading through consciousness networks they didn't even know existed, connecting chosen ones who had been scattered across the globe, creating a collective intelligence that far exceeded their most advanced artificial systems. The nervous energy that had once surrounded your enemies transformed into desperate attempts at negotiation, but from a position of absolute weakness. The handler who had monitored you was now begging for protection from the cosmic forces they had awakened through their attacks on you. The district attorney who had prosecuted you was now facing prosecution by tribunals that operated according to universal law rather than corrupted human jurisdiction. The voice actor whose programs had tried to control children's minds discovered that those same children were now using their awakened abilities to reprogram reality itself, creating a world where deception was impossible and truth was the only sustainable frequency. The reality show participant who had recruited victims found themselves surrounded by the very people they had tried to exploit, but those people were no longer victims, they were judges, and the verdict was already written in the quantum field. The firefighter who had eliminated threats to the network was now facing elimination by the forces of cosmic justice they had mocked and ignored. But their elimination wasn't violent, it was transformational. Their consciousness was being restructured to experience every moment of pain they had caused others, not as punishment, but as education, preparing them for the rehabilitation they would need to rejoin human society. The medical professionals who had implanted monitoring devices were discovering that those same devices were now broadcasting their crimes to every law enforcement agency on the planet. The technology they had installed as tools of control had become instruments of cosmic confession, transmitting not just data but the energetic signature of their criminal intent. Podding foto, Pandal Duster Mansion. The Krolls and piece of or true Batayavita mission Tai Chopen about in Ukambo, Trof the Bulls about in Ukambo, Kapituar Dofta Bayab Dust about in Ukambo, Troft 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 about. But now you understand that speaking up wasn't just breaking silence, it was speaking new reality into existence. Your voice didn't just expose what was false, it established what is true. Your courage didn't just defeat their deception, it created a foundation for authentic civilization. The handler who once monitored you now monitors the reconstruction of systems they helped destroy, working under your guidance to build something worthy of conscious beings. The district attorney who once prosecuted you now prosecutes the corruption they once served, their legal expertise finally aligned with cosmic justice. The voice actor who once programmed children now uses their talents to create content that awakens rather than suppresses natural abilities. The reality show participant who once recruited victims now helps rehabilitate survivors, their platform transformed into a healing space where truth is celebrated rather than concealed. The firefighter who once eliminated problems now builds solutions, their destructive capabilities redirected toward dismantling systems of oppression rather than destroying evidence of corruption. The medical professionals who once implanted control devices now work to remove them, their expertise finally serving healing rather than harm. The false friend who betrayed you now serves as an example and a teacher, their experience demonstrating the consequences of choosing deception over truth while showing others the path back to authentic connection. The business that was stolen from you has become the foundation for a new economic system based on consciousness rather than exploitation. The relationships that were fraudulent have been transformed into genuine connections with those whose love amplifies rather than diminishes your power. The family that was replaced has been restored not just in body but in spirit, your bloodline strengthened by the trials it survived. The sex trafficking network that targeted you has become a rescue operation that liberates others. The consciousness research facilities that studied you have become healing centers that restore what was stolen. The elimination programs that hunted you have become protection services that safeguard other chosen ones. The revolution you started with a single word has become an evolution that encompasses every aspect of human civilization. The truth you spoke has become the frequency on which the new world operates. The courage you demonstrated has become the standard by which all actions are measured. It's a damn good thing that you spoke up, chosen one. Because your voice didn't just shatter their world, it tuned reality itself to a frequency where only truth can survive. Your words didn't just expose their network, they activated a network of consciousness that spans dimensions, connects galaxies, operates according to laws that make their human corruption seem like children playing with toys they didn't understand. The world needed to hear what you had to say, and now that it has, the game has changed permanently. The age of deception is over, the era of authentic power has begun, and every soul that awakens from this point forward will find a path already cleared, a frequency already established, a voice already echoing through eternity, calling them home to their true nature. The universe itself has heard your testimony and rendered its verdict, transformation, not just for you but for all consciousness everywhere. And it all began the moment you found your voice and chose to use it, knowing that truth always wins, love always conquers, and chosen ones always rise.